Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 1 of the Creative Kindergarten podcast. My name is Amanda, and this week I want to talk to you a little bit about classroom setup and the classroom environment. So, the first time I spoke to you, I did a brief introduction of myself and kind of spoke a little bit about what I do in the classroom and what my background is in. But in case you didn't listen to the introductory video, I'm just going to go over again that I am an early childhood educator and I've been in the full day kindergarten classroom now for 5 years. So the full day kindergarten classroom in Ontario, where I live, is a play-based learning environment. So it might look extremely different from schools that are outside of Ontario, but also my perspective on kindergarten might be completely different from even a class that is across the hallway from us, because we are not given much direction as to what our program needs to look like, what our program needs to have. It is truly up to the educator team that is in the classroom to make their own decisions when it comes to their own classrooms. So I wanted to take a moment just to really talk about that, because I think it's really important to understand that just because it works in the classrooms I've been in doesn't mean it's going to work for you or that it should work for you. Maybe you have a completely different philosophy. Maybe you have a completely different way of teaching from what I and how I enjoy teaching, and that is completely okay. I love listening to podcasts and listening to other educators speak about their experiences in the classroom so that I can gain insights, but that doesn't mean that I necessarily agree with everything they have to say or want to follow everything they have to say. So I'm not saying that what I say has to be in a kindergarten classroom is what you have to have in your kindergarten classroom. I'm saying that that is what I have found has worked for us in the past. Whether if I was in the classroom next year and whether that actually worked again for me next year is a completely different story too, because every year, every set of students, everything can change. Even from September to February, you still might need to make changes. So just know that what I say works for me may not work for you. Maybe it is something that you put in your toolbox as an educator and that you can refer back to maybe next year, maybe in a few years. You'll think back and say, oh, I can try this idea. So always know, even I find that when I go to workshops or anything like that, PD sessions, and I hear all these great ideas and I think, I don't know how that would work in my classroom, just know that it doesn't have to. It might not be the right class or the right time to try something new. And I hope that you're here with just an open mind about what I have to offer. And that's always been kind of a scary part for me of starting this podcast, is that I know not everybody's going to agree with everything I have to say, but know that we all have different opinions. We all have different philosophies for our classrooms. And that can be a great asset to have all these experiences and have all these different ways of thinking about our classroom environments, and that we can take those different ideas and see what works for us and in our classroom. So with that, here is episode 1, what my FDK classroom has looked like. I have been in full day kindergarten, as I said, for 5 years. I've had 3 different teaching partners and I've worked in, I think, 4 different classrooms. So every classroom has looked a little bit different, and every summer I spend a lot of time thinking about what I want our classroom to look like in the next year. So this year, I'm actually not going to be going back into the classroom in September. I'm taking on an ECE facilitator role through the board office, so I won't have a classroom environment to go back to. So the upside of that is that in August, I don't have to spend my time setting up the classroom for a few weeks before school starts, because I don't have a classroom environment to set up. On the downside is that I do love that part of kindergarten. I love thinking about the spaces and how to best utilize the spaces. So I think I am going to miss that part of going into a classroom and rethinking the space and how best to make it work for our students. So I'm going to explain a little bit about the full day kindergarten classroom for those of you who are not from Ontario, Canada, and maybe from a district or a different school board that doesn't run a full day kindergarten program or doesn't run a play-based program. I've heard of other places where their schedule is completely set. They have a curriculum that is completely set. They have to follow a script. They have to do certain worksheets and workbooks and certain programs. That is not the case in our school. So for our classroom, we have prep periods, 8 prep periods a week that are given out by the administrators. So those are 8 periods a week that are not taught by the core kindergarten team, me and my teaching partner. I stay with the kids, but she gets those 8 periods a week as prep time, as time that she can spend preparing for the classroom and for the activities that we were going to do for that week. So those are the only periods that are really set for us. So for us last year, it was, I think, 5 periods of gym and 3 periods of library time. So those are the only ones that we don't have really any say in. They do take in consideration if we do ask for something, but usually we don't have any say in that. The rest of our time is basically up to us. So we, because we have 4 kindergarten classes, we don't all go out for recess at the same time. So in our school, there is a 15-minute recess in the morning, a half an hour recess at lunch, and a 10-minute recess at the end of the school day. We get to decide when we go out. We don't have to go out with the rest of school because the kindergarten pen is a different area than the rest of the school. We don't have to go out for those recesses at the time that they say, as the rest of the school does. So instead, we kind of flip-flop. So 2 classes will go out for recess first, and then the next 2 classes will go out for recess next. So that way the kids just have more space to play in. It's safer space for them to be in, and they just have more things to do because they're not sharing it with 4 classes. There's only 2 of us out there. And my teaching partner and I decided at the beginning of the school year that our recess time, we could extend it or take away some recess time as we saw fit. When it was really cold outside, -30, it's still very important that the kids go out, but we wouldn't stay out for 30, 40 minutes. Instead, we would come back inside and continue on with our day. But in the summertime, when it was really nice outside and we were getting some amazing weather, we would go out for 30 minutes to an hour just for our morning recess. So it all just really depended on us. We got to decide if there was something we really had to get done in a day. Maybe we didn't go outside for that half an hour. Maybe we only went outside for 20 minutes in the morning. The half an hour at lunch, they always go out for half an hour at lunch. They eat their lunch for half an hour, and then they go outside for the last half hour of their lunch period. And then because we had gym in the afternoon, we never took that last minute, the last recess, that last 10-minute recess at the end of the day, because we didn't feel that they needed it because they were going to the gym anyways. So we really get to set our own schedule within the full day kindergarten program, at our school at least. And so we really get to set how our day looks like. On the other hand, it makes it hard because sometimes we do have to make some tougher decisions about how we spend our time. And so because we get to decide how we spend our time, we made sure that we had a balanced day, so that we do literacy centers in the morning, math centers in the afternoon, and they also get time for just free choice play at the end of the day that they can decide what they want to do. So we set our classroom to reflect this free flow of the day. In our full day kindergarten classroom, we get to decide what our day looks like, but we also get to decide how our learning environment looks like. We are provided with tables that the kids get to sit at. So we can't do any kind of flexible seating because we aren't allowed to bring in outside furniture. The custodial staff will not clean our rooms if we have outside furniture. And we are not allowed to get rid of any of the furniture that they have put in our classroom. So things like a teacher desk, which is always a hot debate. I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of the day. We couldn't get rid of our teacher desk. We have tried. So we get to decide what our classroom environment looks like with the materials that they have given us. So we have a full dramatic play center with fridge, a play fridge, obviously, a play fridge, a play sink, a table and chairs that is set up for our kindergarten students. And we also decided that this past year, we did a fine motor table where each week we change out a different fine motor activity. And that was a standing table it was just a table we had in our room. We just raised it. So it was still using the materials that they gave us, but we just changed it a little bit so that we could have an option for students to stand if they needed a little break from sitting. We had a ledge at the back of our room that we turned into a small world play center that we changed out every week, where it would just be something that was free choice, building, STEM, and just having that free thinking, creative thinking skills component at that center. And then we also have two sensory bins available to us. So we had one that just stayed filled with sand, and then we had another sensory bin that we changed out weekly with different materials in it. And maybe that can be a whole other podcast of something that we would be interested in learning more about our sensory bins and how we've used them in the past few years. Just let me know. That could be something I can talk to too. And so with our classroom set up the way it is, I always want to make sure, because we can't change out, move any furniture, I always want to make sure that the space works for our students. We have free choice centers. They don't rotate according to what we tell them to do. They self-regulate and choose their learning centers to the best of their ability. Sometimes they do need some redirection and some help to make some good choices, but we want to make sure that they have the freedom to explore their classroom. So our setup is always in a way that the students feel comfortable to get what they need, to go where they need, and to find help if they need it. So our setup at the beginning of the year is very simple. We put materials and tools out that they might need, like scissors and glue, but we also show them where they go when they're done. So if they need to be put away in a cupboard because there's not enough shelf space, they know where that goes. If it's materials that they can use, like literacy tools or math tools that are out on the shelves, they are free to go get them and bring them out. So our class setup is very free flowing, and it serves our students. Not very many of our teaching materials, like things that I don't want the kids to use, are out for where the students could reach them, because that's their environment. That's where they should have the tools that they need to make their learning happen. Things up on the wall. So this has always been an issue. I'm part of a big Facebook group with lots of kindergarten teachers, and they're always talking about their classroom decor. I know classroom decor can be a very personal choice. So whether or not you want to do a zoo theme or a Minnie Mouse theme, or you want to have polka dots and rainbows, or you want to go with more muted tones. I've never had a classroom theme. I know that may be shocking to some of you. 5 years, no classroom theme. Ideally, I also have to work with a teaching partner. So ideally, I would have wanted to come into the classroom with nothing on the walls and have everything co-created with the students. So we had, this past year, we had taken down a lot of our math wall. And this year I co-created a lot of the math walls with our students so that they could really understand what was being put up on the walls and why, and if they needed help, where to go for that help, because they had created it. They knew where it was in the classroom for themselves. I see the classroom as the third teacher. It's not meant to be there for my comfort. It's not meant to be there because it makes me happy. A classroom is another teacher that's in the room that is there for the students. And I know, again, this is going to be a contentious issue because I know so many teachers see it as their space and see it as their home away from home, and they want to decorate it how they feel comfortable, how they think the students want the classroom to be. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. I'm just saying I have a very different philosophy where I don't think having a lot of colors and a lot of decorations in the room is beneficial to our students. And there has been some research that has shown that it can be a detriment to some students, especially with students who have ADHD that may be distracted by all the extra stuff that is in your classroom. So we do co-create a lot of the things that go up around our classroom. If I was going back into the classroom again this year, I would even want to step it up even more. I had made interactive word wall for our students last year. And so the word wall was already up, And then as students were doing their writing and they needed a sight word, they would take it off. It was on Velcro. They could take it off and bring it to the desk and use it and then put it back. If I was to do it again, I would want them to make it. And one year we did do it and it was very successful, where the kids co-created the word wall with us. I would want them to create their own alphabet, their own letter charts, things that they use on a daily basis. I feel like they should be the ones to create it. And that doesn't mean that you can't have an accurate alphabet chart somewhere in the classroom for them to reference in case they need to. I'm just saying that as you progress through the year, maybe those things become replaced with things that the students have made themselves, or you just start off the year with blank walls and you just work with the students to make everything that goes up on the walls. I also don't really have any decorations up in our classroom. We decorate with the students' work. So we take pictures of the students. So let's say our building center was had a blank wall behind it for a lot of the time. And what students would do is, as they were building, they would ask me to take a picture. I would take a picture, print it out, and then I would put their pictures up on the wall of them building. It gave them a sense of belonging in the classroom. It gave them a sense of importance, like what they were doing in our side of our classroom mattered. And I think it's really important. So there wasn't any decorations in the classroom other than what the students themselves had made. And I think that's really important for them to feel a sense of belonging within the classroom, that they see themselves reflected throughout the room. So as I've said, my personal philosophy with a full day kindergarten classroom was definitely using the classroom as a third teacher, using it to their benefit, so that they're not asking you where things are all the time. They're not asking you how to spell sight words or where to find numbers or things that the classroom can just do for you. If you set up your classroom in a way that students feel empowered to help themselves, then you'll see that it takes a lot of work off of yourself, because you're not constantly answering those questions. They can just figure out where it is on their own. And then, so another part of my personal philosophy is the teacher desk. So as I said, we are not allowed to remove any furniture from our room, even though I have tried. So this is always a discussion I see too around the teacher desk of, do you use a teacher desk? Why do you use a teacher desk? If you don't use a teacher desk, what do you use? I really tried to get rid of our teacher desk for a long time because it doesn't really serve a purpose other than cutting me off from the students. So when students were in the classroom, we hardly ever sat behind the teacher desk. The only reason we would sit there is because the computer plug to put into our projector was next to the teacher desk. So you would need to sit at the desk in order to use the laptop. And so I feel like the teacher desk can be a barrier to your students rather than helpful in that manner. Maybe you need a teacher desk. Maybe you need that space to be organized. Maybe you need that space just to give you yourself your own little nook within your own classroom, and that's fine. I just never felt the need for that. I'm a fairly organized person. There's a ledge at the back of our classroom that we could always put our stuff on. There is a guided table that could be used to put pens and pencils out that a teacher would need. But I never saw a use for a teacher desk, and every year that I had one, I always wished I could get rid of it, but unfortunately, we can't move any of the furniture. There's no space to store any furniture that we take out of our classroom, so everything that they give us has to stay in the classroom. So that is my personal philosophy of what our classroom can and should look like within an ideal world. Even every year that I've worked in full day kindergarten, like I said, I've been doing it for 5 years. Every year it changes. Every year I spend my summer thinking of different ways to make the classroom more accessible to students, make the classroom a more inviting place for students, to make the classroom really work for our students. And every year it changes. Even throughout the year it might change. You might get a student with a disability that comes in and you might need to move everything around because their wheelchair doesn't fit through the gaps in the tables. That happened to us one year. We had a student who was blind and we had to make sure our tables were far enough apart so that she could get by without walking into chairs. You might have a student that needs their own special workplace, so you might have to move things around so that they have their own space so that they can do their best learning within your classroom. You might find that some students just don't do well with a lot of things up on the wall. They don't do well with a lot of distractions, so you might have to change things around. Every classroom, every year, every student is different, and that might change from September to October to November. You might have to make changes to your classroom. And I think as teachers, we have to be flexible enough to recognize when the space is what is not working and change that space, and know that our classroom is not our home. Our classroom is a space for learning and a space for our students to do their best learning in. So please let me know what you think of this. What are your personal philosophies on a classroom environment? What should a classroom look like to you? Do you completely agree with me? Maybe you do a similar philosophy in your classroom, or maybe you completely disagree with me and you think, no, I want my colorful rainbow classroom, and here's why. I want to hear your reasonings behind this, because I think it's really important to have these conversations, because without these conversations, there is no movement, there is no growth. And I really love growing and hearing different viewpoints and hearing different ideas about the kindergarten class and how that can work for each class. So let me know. There's several different ways that you can follow me and get in contact with me. I have a blog over on creativekindergartenblog.com. You can reach me on Facebook at Creative Kindergarten, and I'm on Instagram with Creative Kindergarten Blog on TPT. I know it's a mouthful. And you can reach me in any of those ways. I'm always here to listen and to share my ideas or answer questions. Next week, I want to talk a little bit about the first day of school. I know that's either that has passed for you already and you go back to school early August, or you're like us and we don't go back, the students don't come back to school until September. I think it's 3rd or 4th this year. So next episode, I'd love to talk to you guys about what to expect on the first day of school. So if you have any questions about that, make sure you come and contact me. I'll make sure all the different ways to get in touch with me are in the show notes so that you can make sure that you get any questions over to me. Thank you for joining me on this first full episode of my podcast. I'm really excited to be here and to join in the conversation about kindergarten and about how we can learn and grow together within our kindergarten classroom. I hope you'll join me again for the next episode, and I will see you guys next time.